Welcome to Happy Times and Places, in which I, Toby Hadoke, try to spin a positive note when watching a Doctor Who story chosen by a friend of mine and try to guess what their favourite things about it are. Why? Because Kroll told me to do it.
Hello, my name is Ian Winterton. I'm a playwright and writer and journalist, and in the world of Doctor Who, I'm currently writing comic books for Cutaway Comics, Demons of Eden, which is out now as a backup strip with the Omega comic by Mark Griffiths, and I've also got a graphic novel coming called Affirmative, which might feature a bit of K9, and I've also got other things from Cutaway that I can't talk about, but they're very exciting. So, onto the podcast, and I am picking The Power of Kroll from 1978. And I was 6 when this came out, so it's absolutely seared into my brain. I always say I'm a Hinchcliffe man, but actually, when I look back, I'm very much a Graham Williams era man as well, because this is when I really remember watching them. Although I'd say a lot of the better stuff is because of the influence of Hinchcliffe, but that's for another time. But Power of Kroll, not as well loved as other Robert Holmes adventures.
Well, hello. I hope you're very well today. The date is immaterial. This is a podcast in time and space, and I don't want to limit us by confining us to one small period of the 21st century Earth. But it could, I do not swear. I try not to swear in these podcasts because I'm talking about Doctor Who, and it would seem wrong. It would be like getting drunk with Tinky Winky, or get smacked up with Captain Pugwash, or or any other inappropriate things with children's entertainers. It'd be like, we'll leave it at that. Taking drugs with Zamo Maguire. Oh, hang on. But listen, the washing. I've just changed the fuse in the plug because I thought the washing machine seemed to blow a fuse. It hasn't blown a fuse. It's blown itself. It's died. So washing machine's died. Tax bill in today. TV program started last night that's had excellent reviews that I was up for a part. In fact, I had a part that the writer told me had written with my voice in mind, and then when I auditioned for it, I didn't get it. So that's just been on. And today I got an email telling me that the job I thought I kind of hoped I was going to be doing, and it'd been kind of hinted that I was. I got a lovely email telling me all the reasons they liked the last bit of work I did for them, and then just a tiny little part of the email saying that they weren't actually going to be asking me to do anything on the latest batch that they're doing. So today, without swearing, is a bell end, and I've taken the dog for a walk to try and get some fresh air, clear my head. That is good medicine. I've also been a bit self-indulgent, what this isn't, by eating a cookie, a warm cookie with ice cream and squirty cream, which not normally things that aren't really good for me. But do you know what? Neither of those things really hits. Do you know what is going to make me feel better today? Not an awful lot. It's a really rotten day. Do you know what's going to make me feel better today, everybody? Watching a story that wasn't even on my timetable. I sort of do I do a sort of vague plan just so that I mix the doctors up fairly and perhaps mix styles and all that sort of thing. Although even then I released 2 Michael Ferguson directed stories in a row because I'm an idiot. But this wasn't even on the list. And dear old Ian, I think, recorded this ages ago, so I wonder if his projects that he can't talk about have been out and gone. I don't know. If Ian, when you hear me, tweet and we'll retweet on the back of it. What's going to make me feel much better than fresh air of the park and gallivanting out with my dog and the lovely sugar rush of unctuous warm cookies and beautifully melting silky ice cream is The Power of Kroll, and I don't care. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to watch. So, and just to prove how well today is going, I'm looking at the monitoring levels on my audio recording, and they're fantastic. Had I actually pressed record, so there's going to be a slight change because fortunately I have a video backup. So that audio is from that, and I'm now going to change and press record on the audio, which will mean there's now an increase in quality. So, right, I'm going to watch The Power of Kroll. What could possibly go wrong? Let's. I've got it lined up on BritBox. I'm going to press play in 3, 2. Oh, don't fade. 3, 2, 1. Even BritBox was getting bored of me. It started to fade to black. Right, it's The Power of Kroll. I think this is probably the last Key to Time story I saw, because always had a bit of a bad reputation. It was the last one Robert Holmes did for years. Nobody really had much that was nice to say about The Power of Kroll. And as we'll discover, not many people lived to tell the tale either, or made themselves known. And I've always had a bit of a soft spot for it, except then when I did it for Running Through Corridors, which is the last time I saw it, I actually found a lot of the seeds of these men sitting back being cross with each other rather tedious, which surprised me because I quite like men sitting in a room yelling at each other. That's my idea of drama. I like this. I like this this setup here because I believe these people know each other, and I just little things like Harg's throwaway line to Thorne, who's brought him his whatever it is, his space books, saying, "How much do I owe you?" The idea that you bring somebody that in real life, in real worlds, if somebody brings you something, it's going to have cost them. And this is a nice bit of plotting. We've got the mystery early on of who's followed Thorne down in his ship. But yeah, as I say, the first time I watched this, I liked all of this stuff. But when I did it through Running Through Corridors, I got a bit. I found this the later scenes with these guys a bit tedious, which surprises me because, as I say, character actors yelling at each other in a room is my kind of thing. Business is you're a bastard, but I'm going to sell the business. That's my kind of thing. I mean, even Succession now is you're a bastard. I'm related to you. I'm going to sell the business. That to me is drama. I'm not very ambitious, but this sets up. Obviously, there's a parallel here with politics and also literature. Last of the Mohicans casts a big shadow over this, and not least because it's got two of the cast, Philip Madoc here, looking furious. And John Abernethy essentially playing the same part that he played in Last of the Mohicans, for which he got an Emmy nomination. But I'm sure we'll talk about that. I'm sure I'll talk about John Abernethy a lot because he's an actor I talk about a lot. I love Philip Madoc's look here. Philip Madoc does so much with this part. Philip Madoc's performance is an object lesson or an object example of getting a fantastic actor and illustrating exactly what value they bring to something that is on the page. And I like the sort of slightly embellished story that he thought he was playing Thorne, then when he turned up he wasn't playing Thorne. I don't think it's quite as clear cut as that. I think he was offered Thorne, and then that offer was taken away because Neil McCarthy accepted. I think, I like Neil McCarthy, and I think he's brilliant as Barnum in The Mind of Evil. But I think if you get Madoc, you take Madoc. And then Alan Browning was supposed to be playing Fenner. You've got to admire Norman Stewart's casting. I have to say, Norman Stewart had been a production assistant, and actually after being a director went back to being a production assistant. That's a really interesting yo-yo that I'm not sure has been repeated with Doctor Who director, and he was a hugely respected production assistant, so the natural progression is to then be promoted to be a director, and he did Underworld and The Power of Kroll. He does the Omega Factor as well, doesn't he? And then he goes, I think I'll be a production assistant again. We don't even know. We think he's dead. Phil Newman did get a taped interview with him. He was a Canadian fellow, and he was in sort of Aberdeen or somewhere, but the trail has gone dry. But I think his story would be an interesting one to tell. But because I think he was a respected production assistant, his casts, I remember getting the Doctor Who magazine and reading the cast lists of the Norman Stewart stories and going, even in the small parts, you've got people like Frank Jarvis and Richard Shaw, actors. He seemed to like to use actors who'd been in Doctor Who before, which immediately made him appeal to me. But he gets really good actors. Interestingly, though, that's sometimes not enough. And in fact, his stories, I mean, thinking Underworld as well, where you have a cast that on paper is really strong looking, and then you come away from it and go, oh, what went wrong with everybody? So sometimes there's a weird sort of alchemy that either happens or doesn't. And it's not necessarily because people are happy or unhappy, because if we're led to believe it, Philip Madoc was unhappy on this, and I think he's the best thing in it. But I equally don't buy that. Oh, he's playing the part pissed off because he is pissed off. He's a better actor than that. Do you know what I mean? It's like saying, oh, he was a bit cold, so he played the part cold because it was all. I mean, come on. And nobody is in a bad mood for 4 weeks based on it. Do you know what I mean? I think that's a nice thing that we've added to it. Maybe that was his impetus for playing the part. But actually, I think it's really interesting when we look at some of the later scenes how him being furious actually gives the scenes the drama that they need. So whether he was annoyed or not because of the way that his casting had come about, what he's doing is a really good acting choice. And also this stuff on film is obviously much earlier than the stuff that we get to later on where he's particularly furious, but actually giving life to the thing. But I love this marshy setting. This is a really unusual setting for Doctor Who. The swamp is being green is really, really interesting. And then you've got Glenn Owen here, who later became famous to sort of viewers of my generation. He'd been around, of course, he'd been in The Brothers and lots of other stuff. But he was Jack Rolfe in Howard's Way, who was the sort of character that would take a slug of whiskey and then say something cross. And I like the sorts of... I mean, sort of, he would have been very happy in the control room of Delta Magna. You know, oh, you're a bastard and there's a squid and I'm going to buy the squid. It's that kind of... you shot the wrong man's hat is nice. But look at that sort of reedy, pampas grassy sort of stuff. That is very unusual. And of course it's convincing because it's real backdrop for a Doctor Who story. I think setting a Doctor Who story in a marsh is a lovely idea. Got a brilliant cast on paper. Robert Holmes is a fantastic writer, and I think he's laying out the story beats and the characters very, very well. So we know that the Swampies are there and that they're a potential threat and that these guys don't like them, but it's not political to just wipe them out. They have to sort of pay lip service to living in harmony, even though they've displaced these people and they don't like them. The Doctor brilliantly comes in. I love the way that the Doctor behaves with these sort of scumbags, actually. And then we've got a whole different thing going on in Swampyland where the actors are rising above the cliched natures of their characters. Now, Robert Holmes was a very clever writer, so is the cliche part of the joke? Is this whole thing a bit of a joke? And if it is, I think it kind of works. He's had to watch the sort of rather patronising, and he's not afraid to use that stuff either, but the patronising way that indigenous peoples are treated in dramas of this kind. And yet I think he actually does some quite interesting stuff with it, and I think the actors are sort of in on the joke, which I think makes all the swampy stuff perhaps slightly better than we often than we might necessarily allow it to be if we just take what's going on the surface, which is, an actor painted green prostrating himself at a badly composited model shot. I think there's a lot more going on, and we will see why. the Irish accent's an interesting choice. It's a sort of shorthand for roguish gun runner. It's a bit Caves Vandrazani, though, isn't it? It's that he's running guns to the Swampies, but actually it's his ship that's come in behind Thorn. So although Thorn is acting slightly suspicious and allows Fenner to shoot somebody that isn't Rome Dutt, it's Thorn that's sort of got Rome Dutt to supply the Swampies with, turns out, knackered weapons in order to give him an excuse to exterminate them, which is excellent sort of plotting, really. It's a good... It all makes sense within the setup that has been very economically wrought, because we've got a refining plant with 4 people in it and a tribe of Swampies with 3 of whom talk, and then this sort of shady Gudrunner guy liaising between the two. Tom Baker sort of falling. I know he's just been pushed, but that's a great edge. You can tell he probably said to Neil McCarthy, "Wouldn't it be witty if you pushed me?" And I sort of fell in. But it's a great way, because you open the scene with the Doctor sort of bowling in like a sort of ball of crazy energy, and I think he's wonderfully obtuse in all of this stuff. He's got, he's so patronising about the methane catalyzer. It's like these big beefy bully guys, and he's just like, I've seen loads of these things, but behind that sort of cheeky, slightly schoolboy anarchy obtuseness that he has, and that smile, he's got a, I'll use Rob Shearman's phrase again, the sort of the quiet danger, but I love the way he doesn't even look at the thing. He's like, that's a thing. The Doctor's fierce intelligence, and fierce in both senses of the word, and the sort of very dismissive way that he runs rings around their primitive technology, and Madoc is equal to it, which I really like. I mean, his line was something like, "Yes, that's brilliant." Now, the way that Haag does it is to go, "Oh, that's brilliant," but then Madoc follows it up, and on the page is, "Yes, that's brilliant." It's just a backup. He turns it into a sort of quiet threat, a kind of, "What the hell are you up to?" That sort of purred menace for what is essentially sort of not even exposition, just sort of re-emphasizing the Doctor's brilliance, but he's made Fenner take it as a sign of danger, and it's just adding layers to the performance there, adding layers to the drama and to the interaction and to what the Doctor means to these characters beyond what they're all saying to each other. I think Madoc is so good in this, and I remember when I read the book going, he plays that part, because that's just sort of like second in command. He does it again on the page, and not even that cross. I think John Abernethy is also superb. I mean, managing to retain his dignity whilst painted green with a sort of fraying balaclava for hair is, I think, takes great, and the absolute, and it's actually a very funny performance, but the reason it works is because it's a funny performance played absolutely straight. I think John Abernethy is totally in on the joke, and this is brilliant stuff, because everyone treats the Swampies as though they're idiots, but Ranquin there going, "What, you need our signature because the Sons of Earth don't trust you? I've got your number, pal, but I am being absolutely polite with you. We're not sort of staccato, monosyllabic savages that these characters can often be. Ranquin is a wily operator, and that is a sort of, that is a real dig at Rome Dutt, but he's still, because he's a politician, essentially, he may be green and wearing a loincloth, but as we will discover with Ranquin, he's a politician. What the hell is Tom Baker doing there? He's just been given a drink, and he's put it in his pocket. That, to me, is a sign that Tom Baker is going, I don't think this director's massively in control of this set. And I suspect the producer has just read the scripts for the Armageddon Factor and is crying. So I'm going to put this drink in my pocket and see if anybody stops me. And of course, nobody will. And he's also referred to the, and I didn't mention the, on the hovercraft, there's another guy who we never see indoors, because, of course, he's only on film. But they have referred to, I'm pleased that they referred to it there, because they says there's 6 of us, there's 5 of us, the Doctor goes 6. So they go, no, because he's not counting Mensch, because they're essentially racist. But by 5, he means these 4 here, and the guy who drives the hovercraft, who never comes indoors. We never find out what happens to him. He doesn't even get a name, so... Trevor Hovercraft is obviously just stays and tends to his hovercraft, and I want to be alone with my hovercraft. I'm not coming in and watching the Bagule on the telly. But we never know what happens to Trevor Hovercraft. Is Bagule a word, or is that just a Robert Holmes thing saying, well, I need to call it something. Bay is not exciting enough. Area of the swamp is too much of a matter. Bagule. You kind of know what they're talking about, and this is great. And in fact, from what we know of later on, is that Fenner is the sort of survivor. He's not very nice here. He actually becomes the sort of the voice of reason by the end of it. But I love the way that the Doctor absolutely does not stand for their horribleness, but he doesn't. Now is not the time for righteous indignation. Now the time is to undercut that with a sort of sense of humour and a sort of, childlike quizzicalness that masks, intense disapproval. It's the Doctor saying one thing, meaning another. So it means it's really interesting to watch. The delivery is fun and exciting, but also it speaks to how these characters are interacting, and the Doctor saying one thing but really meaning another. I think that all works really well. I think it all works really nicely. And to top it off, we have night filming, which looks fantastic. This is brilliant. But I mean, this is King Kong, and that's interesting, isn't it? How this mere act of painting them green somehow makes this slightly less problematic than it could be. If you're watching, King Kong or something like that, we know, and if you were to make one of those dramas from days gone by in relatively recent history, and you'd hired a load of actors of colour, well, it's difficult, because you could then be said, well, we're giving 3 nice speaking roles to black actors who aren't seen enough. So it's very complicated, actually, because that would have been a good, there'd be certain black actors who don't get a look in with Doctor Who going, right, we've got some decent speaking parts, and then down the line they'd probably have to go, but isn't it typical that it had to be those sorts of parts? But instead it's gone, well, actually that's a bit too stereotypical to create the characters that everyone calls savages. Now we know they're called savages by bad characters, but to make those actors of colour, that would be a bit dodgy. To have them dancing and doing the sort of grass-skirted ritual to the squid thing, that I think that would make this much less of a comfortable watch now. Of course it would. So they somehow get away with still making that sort of depiction, but painting them green. It somehow makes it slightly more palatable, even though all of the same sort of things are going on. But as I say, I think it's interesting. I think that the depiction of the swamp is there's some horrible language used, but that is used by not very nice people who are, the story is completely making the point that moving these people off Delta Magna to the moon of Delta Magna was pretty horrible, and now that they're inconvenient here to do a sort of act of subterfuge in order to make them seem like they're the attackers, which gives us an excuse to wipe them out. That's all. That's all. It's clear who the bad guys are, and ain't the swamp is. Do you know what I mean? Now, Ranquin is an idiot, but he's not an idiot because he's a primitive savage, to use the vernacular. He's and he's actually quite a wily idiot. He's almost, we've seen that being a bit of an unpleasant half-wit is no bar to political power, and actually being a wily political operator, you can be one of those things whilst not being terribly bright. But also Ranquin as a religious manipulator is another really interesting thing. He's almost like a sort of televangelist, and there's got some great stuff later on, which we'll get to in the later episodes. So I think there's some really, really interesting stuff going on. I mean, Mensch, Terry Walsh has had to deliver a line recently, and it's never the most edifying of experiences, because eagle-eyed viewers will know that Mensch being played by Terry Walsh means you're half surprised he hasn't gone out onto a ledge and fallen off it, but he's gonna be toast next week. But this adds another layer. I don't quite know why the Doctor keeps being able... It's about 3 times, isn't it, that he's walked out of the room where he's supposedly being held and managed to make a getaway. And they stopped him once and said, come back with us, and then he just buggered off again. But I love this night shooting. I love the canoes and the water and the reeds and all of that. As I say, I think the swampies are more interesting than they need to be. And the episode is going to end on a joke that isn't paid off till next week. So I think Power of Kroll is often sort of criticised for being dull. I think there's lots of interesting things going on. I think there's lots of things that work better than they should. A lot of things that don't work as well as they should. And a lot of things that either work or don't work, and I'm not sure whether they work or don't work by accident or by design. As I say, I think the pitching of the sort of whole swampy thing is actually much better than it should be. And I don't know if that's because Robert Holmes was so good and the actors managed to pick up on that, or whether actually Robert Holmes is writing slightly substandard and the actors make it work by the level that they pitched. I don't know. And Abernethy had played Chingachgook in Last of the Mohicans, and later went on to play Herne the Hunter. So he kind of specialises in playing sort of deep-voiced deliverers of litanies and all of that. And I was very pleased because I'm a big fan of John Abernethy. He's a running theme in Moths Ate My Doctor Who, Scarf My One Man Show. So I'm delighted that Romana gets threatened by another man in a terrible monster costume in Doctor Who, which turns out to be a joke, that the close-up for the cliffhanger is given to John Abernethy, and I had a sneaking suspicion he might be credited before Madoc, which I was thrilled about, because it would be predictable for Philip Madoc to get high billing, but then you still sort of think, so they got Philip Madoc and he gets 3rd billing. This is the Warlord, this is Mehendri Solon, this is he was Margwa in Last of the Mohicans. I mean, this is and anyway, lucky to have Philip Madoc in a story that I think so far has thrown up lots of really interesting things and has yet to sort of become the problematic, whether it's dreary or anomalous or whatever the problem it has within the Key to Time season. It's certainly, I think, the story that is of the Key to Time season, which I think of as slightly sort of fairy tale-esque, with its androids of Tara, with its swords and fighting and Stones of Blood is a bit sort of dark and low-key and hammery and just the other stories seem a bit more sort of fairy tale. Even Pirate Planet, which is to all intents and purposes sci-fi, is slightly sci-fi once removed, because it's got the sort of fantastical comedic Douglas Adams things going on. This story of them all in as a fan whose earliest memories are, I think, repeats of Invisible Enemy. But I remember them repeating the Pirate Planet. I remember watching the Pirate Planet quite vividly, but I don't remember the rest of season 16. So I think it was a repeat of Pirate Planet that I remember. But so I sort of discovered, I watched the Key to Time stories in retrospect. My earliest memories of on broadcast first time of season 17, really. This seemed to me like the story that was most like Doctor Who. Do you know what I mean? The Doctor Who of my imagination. So as I say, I was always quite surprised when I read about it, and it was kind of like, oh no, it's not that much cop. What am I going to choose as my favourite thing of episode 1? I think I have to get in there early. And I think because it is the most, if you come to it sort of blind, that the most striking thing is just how good Philip Madoc is in a crap part, and just how he is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in those scenes. As I say, I like Neil McCarthy, but I don't think he's does anything particularly special in this. And I will talk about the other actors in the refinery in later episodes, I'm sure. But he's got broad shoulders in this story, Madoc, and there are so many bits when you go, oh, that's really interesting, and then you think about what it is in the script that he's been asked to do. And sometimes it's nothing at all, and sometimes it's a very short line, and he gives it so much well. And credit to Tom Baker as well, I think, who's as I say, sort of slightly obtuse schoolboy undermining of everything that's going on in the refinery, shows just what value he is as a doctor. And yeah, I like the swamp, and I like the night scenes, and I like all of that, and we might come to those things later on. But I think the thing that strikes me the most, and that will continue to make its presence felt. So it means he might choose it for a later episode, but because I've chosen it for episode 1, that still counts for me. I'm going to choose Philip Madoc playing Fenner. Whereas my normal reaction would be to go, well, we take the famous actor for granted. I'm not going to choose him because it's obvious he should be good. And it is, to me, obvious that Philip Madoc will be good. And he's brilliant in Brain and Morbius and brilliant in the War Games. But I wonder if I'll choose him in either of those things because I sort of almost expect it. Whereas here, he's sort of above and beyond the call of duty. And he certainly should. The art lies not in the fact that he is here. It's in the fact that he really shouldn't be here at all. And yet is still firing on all cylinders. Philip Madoc, I love your acting. Especially when you're giving above and beyond the call of duty. Love it.
So starting off with episode 1, I would say the hovercraft. Absolutely love hovercrafts. They're very much part of my childhood, in that the only time we went abroad until I was 16 was to Calais via a hovercraft. And I think it was not long after the Power of Kroll, so I felt like I was in the future. But yeah, absolutely love the hovercrafts zipping around. They're jetpacks for things we will have in the future, but that are possible.
That's actually a good choice because you don't see many hovercrafts in Doctor Who. I think of there's one in the Sea Devils, and there's the superb one in Planet of the Spiders that runs over Stuart Fell. But it is, and of course at the time that was a kind of thing. That must have been great for the production team to go, we've got a hovercraft. Trevor insists on driving it though. He's a terrible actor though, so don't give him any line. He won't travel to the studio. I'm surprised. I'm sad that Ian didn't mention the hovercraft and its driver, Trevor. But it's one of those great that it's one of the things that you would do at Doctor Who in the 70s is go, we've got a thing and we can use a thing, and that's actually enough to sort of separate a story from what surrounds it. Well, we've got a hovercraft in it this week, and that does add to the whole, I think, uniqueness of this particular setting. That I think is so much part of the character of the Power of Kroll that isn't talked about enough, actually, because I think the setting, some settings that are unique can be a bit dreary, but actually I think the swamp is refreshing, and of course it's very convincing. It's convincing locale that makes sense within the plot, and throw a hovercraft on it because of course the methane gatherers would have hovercraft in order to do, any maintenance and scooting about. And so, yeah, good call, the hovercraft. But I've got Philip Madoc in the bank because I've got a feeling he's going to get mentioned at some point. And the rules are I have to choose a thing per episode. My friend has to choose a thing per episode, and they choose a bonus thing at the end. And if they choose something in episode 1, I can't choose it in later episodes. So that is gone to me. If we both choose the same thing for episode 1, yes, I get a point because I've chosen the same thing as them. However, if I choose a thing in episode 1 that they choose later, I still get a point for that. However, that then rebounds upon me because it means obviously I won't get the point for the thing that I've chosen in episode 4. If I choose Philip Madoc in episode 4, yeah, I get the point, but I get the point counted against episode 1. But whatever I choose for episode 4, I don't know, Philip Bird's ears, I won't get a point for that because obviously he's chosen Philip Madoc. So it's a double-edged sword, or not terribly exciting scoring system. You decide. But I'm good. The Power of Kroll has done me the power of good, and I hope it has you too. I hope you've come to this going, Power of Kroll's a load of rubbish, and that this makes you go back to it going, actually, why don't I give the Power of Kroll a chance? Because if I achieve nothing else today, it's to give the power of love to the Power of Kroll. It's a beautiful thing. Well, welcome back. Previously on Happy Times and Places, I was in neither. I'm having a rotten day, but I'm not going to be... This isn't a are you okay, hun thing. I just have to be honest with you, tell you where I'm coming from. And I seem to recall I was doing the same in the previous Happy Times and Places for the Curse of Peladon. I don't know. I'm sorry, but there we go. Because I think sometimes it's important to point out that although I accentuate the positive and want to celebrate Doctor in these podcasts, that I'm not a natural ray of sunshine. Do you know what I mean? Because I think we hate happy clappy people more than we hate miserable people. Don't worry, I'm hugely miserable. I just try not to inflict it on anybody else. But I think it was important context to explain. I was supposed to be doing. I'd actually got a few new series ones lined up, but the older series, Classic Who, is more. The facts are more comfortably lodged in my brain for starters, but also it is a bit more of a comfort blanket. So I'd not intended to do The Curse of Peladon, which I did last time, not a particular favourite story of mine, adored. I certainly hadn't intended to do The Power of Kroll, but the beauty of Doctor Who is whatever mood you're in, there's a Doctor Who story to suit your mood. And for some reason, I decided what I wanted to watch today was The Power of Kroll, and fortunately in my bank that I've got of several very kind people who've been very patient, who are probably hoping that they will live to see the day that their Happy Times and Places is released, amongst them Ian, who I don't actually really know, but expressed an interest in the podcast, has done loads of interesting work that is well worth you checking out, and wanted to talk about The Power of Kroll. So what the hell? And that's what I'm going to do now on this gloomy afternoon, where I'm beset with a tax bill, a washing machine, and a two-pronged attack of rejection. Ha ha ha! So it's all going to be cured by The Power of Kroll. So the tax bill, the washing machine's made a one-man whip. And The Power of Kroll is going to make the same man sing. I must now stop doing the Huey Lewis thing. Right. Episode 2 of The Power of Kroll. I've got it, I think, about to kick off on the old BritBox in 3, 2, 1. Sorry, yes. You don't need to know. Did you hear Alexa then? That was just Alexa telling me that she was playing from Sausage Magoo, which is what we call... you don't need to know the pet names we have. There's a room over there called Tim, because we didn't want to call it the back room because there was going to be an extension, so it wouldn't have been at the back anymore. So she said, what's a good name? What's another name? And I said Tim, and it sort of stuck. We even had the builders going, we've left the ladders in Tim. So I'm quite chuffed about that. Anyway, so here we have the Green Swampies, and of course... I did actually get a letter from John Abineri. I'd mostly written to him about Fury from the Deep because that was missing, and so therefore the best one. But he said the most hilarious shoot was as King of the Swampies. And of course, there's all those stories of them having to go to a nearby RAF base, American RAF base, and scrub off, which sounds really painful. Scrub it. I'm not. Would you be? No, because I still know fairly awful stories about. There's so much sort of safety and care taken of actors in various circumstances, but when it comes to getting makeup and masks and things off quickly, it's all pull it off, and oh gosh. It's not always like that, but I have quite sensitive skin, and people have always been very, very nice and always asked. But it's not unusual to see actors with half of their face been torn off, and I suspect that green stuff was. But it's a good look. I mean, it shouldn't quite work. Little green men is a cliche, isn't it? So green, the colour for monsters is green, but the colour for humanoid monsters, is not. You'd expect a bit of latex or a bit of scaling or something to give the. No, these are people who've got green skin, and I actually think it kind of works. And here we have a joke. The cliffhanger was a gag. It's a man in a terrible monster costume, and you go, well, we've seen plenty of those in Doctor Who. No, Scart is basically. He looked more convincing from the front. But then that ties into that. So do monsters in Doctor Who, in the Doctor Who universe, look like men in terrible costumes? Because Romana was fooled by the Scart's. I was the definitive Kroll. But of course, so it's a good gag of going, well, a Doctor Who cliffhanger is usually the companion being threatened by a man in a ropey costume, and the resolution is actually this time it turns out to be a man in a ropey costume. I like that. They hung about on that reaction shot of the Doctor and Romana quite a long time, didn't they? And here's this now. I think this is all quite in another universe. This is like the bit in Earthshock in episode 1, which I think is cracking, when you've got Steve Morley as Walters just looking at lights going out and going, this is terrifying, which is sort of very Alien and Aliens, isn't it? People's signals vanishing or people being picked off in the dark, and this is there's something going on the screens. We can't see what it is, but the signals are suggesting it's something gigantic. And this is great writing. This is these. Turn the lights down a little bit. Beads of sweat here. This is somebody seeing something that is not only perplexing, but if what they're being told is correct, this is terrifying. It doesn't quite come across like that in the episode, and we will examine why. I love all this stuff at night. This is very convincing, and the actors are doing a nice job. And of course, this is nice for Rome Dutt, because in terms of action, although he's just done what I call an Aidan nearly. Aidan is the guy in the Keys of Marinus who gives himself away by going, but that wasn't what the plan was. The plan was to do this. And everyone's, duh. Doesn't one of the monoids do it as well? He goes, don't think that'll be a problem. What? No, nothing. And he's just done but that wasn't the plan. Oh, hang on. I mean, what's that over there? Is it a spaceship? So he needed to do that so that we were tipped off that he is up to no good. Now, I think you could have been slightly less on the nose, but it's a nice, it's a nice sort of character dynamic that you've got this shifty character who he's not quite right because he's a gun runner for starters, and also because I like the way that Carl Rigg, who I think is excellent throughout this as Valak, sort of, he's really holding his stare there, and he's constantly sort of reminding Rome Dutt, we're not thick, but I buy this shiftiness from Rome Dutt going, yeah, but I'm just the guy that brings you the weapons. I don't expect to fight, which is reasonable, but actually that's not the reason he doesn't want to be there. The reason he doesn't want to be there is because he's double-crossed them. So that's great. So he's in a spot now, and I like that sort of double-crossedness, double-crosser being double-crossed, or it's actually circumstance that's double-crossed him, really. So everyone's working to their own. Nobody's very nice in Robert Holmes scripts. I hope Robert Holmes. I don't think anybody that. I was going to say I don't think anybody that funny can be not very nice. I know a lot of people who are funny who actually aren't very nice. So that's not necessarily true. But I think Holmes's humour is so based in the. He treats the people's flaws so even-handedly. I think he's too forgiving or too amused by our shortcomings to have been nasty. And I get the impression he was a hugely intelligent, witty sort of fellow. Would have loved to have had the pleasure. I think I don't know why when he was alive we didn't kind of distill everything we knew about him. He gave a few interviews, but not nearly so many as would have been handy to have come from a person that I think of the classic series understood Doctor Who better than anybody in terms of as just how to do the nuts and bolts of making a Doctor Who script sing. Even when it's a story that, and the Power of Kroll's not ever going to be anybody's favourite story. But and I think we sometimes lazily go, oh, that's because Robert Holmes wasn't having a good day. Really? I don't know. I don't know that there's not enough in this that. Sorry, Norman Stewart with a who I don't think does a particularly awful, universally awful job either. As I say, sometimes the alchemy just doesn't happen. But I think what Robert Holmes has provided, could have produced an awful lot. Now, I know, and I think, don't they, in the discontinuity guide when John Leeson has the line, it hasn't moved for 15 minutes, they say they could be talking about the plot. This isn't plot, but this is tension, which is perfectly acceptable in Doctor Who. There's an whole episode of Earthshock that is just tension, and I wouldn't change it for the world because it's well done. Drama isn't necessarily just about plots unfolding. It is an exercise in atmosphere as well as action, taste, character development, storytelling. But this is great. They're looking at their instruments and going, we can't understand what's going on here. But whatever if these instruments aren't broken, there's something really big. But and Madoc, if everyone was doing what Philip Madoc's doing, these scenes would be rich with tension. And John Leeson, of course, is playing. Now, see, John Leeson there has a line saying, "If he's got friends out there, we're in trouble." It's gonna be awful. I love John Leeson. I love K9. I think John Leeson is a witty, genial man. He's lovely to talk to. I think the character he invests K9 with helps to make K9 something very special. I think he's terrible in this. I think he delivers every line, which should be sweaty, tense. Oh my God, if your friend's done that, we're in trouble. As though that it's the sort of trouble that happens if you haven't got enough paper doilies for the village fete. It's like it's as if the biggest level of tension that is ever going to occur here is the slight misplacement of an itinerary. Now, it was originally, and the Sons of Earth. This is they're being set up as as characters, off stage. They've been mentioned a few times, but they're working away behind the scenes to give people reasons to do or not to do things. That's the way that the camera closes in there on Neil McCarthy as he takes the gun and goes off. And Neil McCarthy doesn't do anything wrong. Atrociously writ. It's the holy writ. It's a holy writ. It's atrociously writ is a terrific line that I love from morning, noon to night. Sucker marks, yeah. So, and this is because it's not just that there's a big monster. It's that the big monster is easily dismissed within the story as a myth because it's in this big old book. And actually, we've seen the big old monster, and it turns out it's a priest carrying on that myth. And this story has a lot to say about religious manipulation. But just in the storytelling of telling the monster story, the monster is a myth, this giant monster. And it's had 3 manifestations. I like the momentum of that. You just go, oh, it pops up every now and again in the centuries. But then that goes to the science. Oh, yeah, if something's massive, it needs to sleep for a couple of hundred years. Okay, I like that. That makes sense within this world and the science or whatever. And due for his... and something about it being, a 4th manifestation, as I say, that momentum, that tying it in with ancient myth, an ancient myth being fulfilled, even though we know ancient myth is kind of bunkum, but it gives it a bit more momentousness because of the momentum, because of the inherited, because of its tying in with the past, and because it's debunking of the religious aspect of it, but also our poo-pooing in our rational world that there's a giant squid god. Well, there is just a giant squid, and the reason we haven't seen it is because it's been asleep, but actually there's enough going on now that might wake it up again. So I think all of that plotting and the way it ties in with the Swampy's religion, and of course the production of the methane, which is what keeps the plant going. I think that is all really, really neatly pieced together in the jigsaw of the Power of Kroll. And of course we haven't discussed how the story being about methane production is basically it's a story about fart harvesting, which I say for no other reason. I'm not really a fart joke kind of guy, but there we go. So there's Terry Walsh fulfilling his contractual obligation. I would have expected a slightly better stunt than that, I have to say, because he sort of just falls slightly out of shot. I wanted to see Terry Walsh being pulled under. Kudos to John Abineri and Carl Rigg there. John Abineri throws himself gallantly into the I'm a religious idiot worshipping a giant squid painted green. I've got an Emmy nomination, what the hell am I doing? And Carl Rigg / Varlick does the brilliant thing of Varlick saves Ranquin and goes, never mind worshipping the squid god. I really like Varlick as a character, and I really like the way Carl Rigg plays him. Never mind your squid god, mate. That bloke with the hat's double-crossed us, and that's a nice... that's a nice twist that the guns are... I'm sure in the book it's that the guns are deliberately doctored in order to kill the Swampies, whereas here I think they just go, oh, they're a bit corroded and a bit knackered. Or it could be that I misinterpreted the book when I was younger, and last time I watched it was like, oh, it's not as obvious, it's not as contrived malfeasance as that. It's just that they're substandard guns rather than that they're deliberately sabotaged. Look at Madoc, dripping with ominousness and menace. But that's why it's quite nice when later, Thorne comes up with the idea, doesn't he, of killing them all. And Fenner, even though he's going, they're savages, and who cares? We've got to do. I'm all about the progress. When he's like, I think we'll just. When Thorne's like, I'm going to kill them all. Fenner's like, oh, hang on, which is surprising. But it makes sense. Anyone can suddenly go, oh, hang on, we're going too far. And Madoc's such a convincing character that I buy it. But at least it means they're not all, they're not all just let's just wipe out the Swampies because we're cardboard sort of racists, as it were. See, again, he can just make the word no speak volumes. poor old Graham Mallard here, who has a very 70s haircut. He's actually quite sexy in Colditz, where he's playing a German officer in a leather jacket and slick back hair. And I was quite surprised to see him in that, looking quite as handsome as he is, because he looks a bit like a clown in this, because he's got 70s hair is not good. And I say that as somebody that for these videos, for these things, I don't do anything with my hair, and it's a bit wild because I'm clinging on to what's left on top. But 70s hair doesn't do many people many favours, especially not in a sort of workplace. Do you know what I mean? That's all very well in a green room or in Carnaby Street or whatever, but you're in a refinery. That perm could get caught in the machinery. So I was quite surprised when I saw him in Colditz, and he immediately looked like a better actor, because I feel a bit sorry for him. He's one we've never quite tried. Well, I sort of vaguely know where he is, I think, but nobody's ever interviewed him. We've always really struggled to get people for the Power of Kroll. I mean, there's no making of on the DVD, is there? And I think they did try, and they basically went, "Shall we just interview Philip Madoc?" Because we've got Mary and John Leeson on the commentary. Because McCarthy's dead, John Abernethy had died, Glyn Owen's dead, Frank Jarvis is dead. Now, you see, I just got all Dad's Army then, didn't I? He's dead. The only thing, I love all of this stuff, but what's slightly spoilt it is that they're going, "Oh my God, there's this giant squid." Is we know, because they're not telling us anything we don't already know, which is a shame, because you sort of almost wished he'd been able to contrive it by going, "What's this giant squid-shaped thing? Oh my God, is the myth of Kroll a reality?" And then we see the squid as it is. We've seen Kroll, and now they're seeing a computer readout of Kroll and going, yes, that's the thing you've already seen. But I like the fact that, it's the refinery raising the lake temperature and the noise and all of that, which has roused Kroll, I love all of this stuff. These actors I think that's just really funny. That's a great sort of, big me up. And I think John Avenue is just really funny the way he goes. And he does all those brilliant hand movements, which are such terrible cliches, but he's doing them on purpose, knowing that they're cliches. And you'll wish that you've died on the stone of blood. That's almost now he doesn't mean the stones of blood. I love these hand movements that he does. They're very funny. It's deliberately funny, but he's not winking at the audience. He knows, and we know that he knows, but to all intents and purposes, he's doing a perfectly proper job. But this stuff's all a bit touchy. Two good actors stuck against a very tatty wall, and Madoc's just gone, "I'm just gonna behave as if I've got wind." It's a story. It's the methane. I've got trapped wind, so I'm furious. But yeah, Scart says you wish you died on the Stone of Blood. Now, the Stone of Blood is obviously the place in the temple, but it's also the Stones of Blood is the title of one of the earlier stories of the season. So is that the only time somebody's referred to something in a story that could also refer to a previous Doctor? Not anyone. You wish you had died in the Inferno. Do you mean the nightclub or the drilling operation? Either. You wish you'd been scratched by a talon of Weng Chiang. This is the line. He's going to get us all killed. Oh, dear. I mean, and that would be hugely inconvenient. The vicar would be... I mean, imagine if he got us all killed when the vicar was coming round for tea and the Women Institute had already booked the marquee. I mean, it really needs... I mean, Martin Jarvis, I think, would have probably underplayed it and probably wouldn't have done the dramatic reading of that line, but I think it still would have had the weight and the gravitas that I'm afraid lovely John Leeson does not have, and in fact undermines with his rather too literal reading of the lines. I love the way that Varlick is with Rom Dutt here, and this smacks in the face. Oh, the Swampies are idiots. Varlic is, who's crucially, him and Scart survive, don't they? But Varlic, is a sign that, these people have survived for a reason. They're not daft, and actually, you can worship a giant squid and be capable of reason and understanding characters and motives and all of that sort of thing. And it's, I think it's better than we might actually give it credit for. And Carl Rigg also does contract some of the language as well, which I think suggests, again, because they could be sort of staccato, monosyllabic, cod savages, which would be embarrassing and bad. And John Abernethy, of course, has he's doing all the liturgical stuff, so he speaks in a certain formal sort of priestly way, which works for the tribesperson thing and for the religious thing, whereas Carl Rigg as Varlic is a bit more modern, and I think he's got a sort of steely mistrust about him that I really like. John Abernethy, but he's also got a bit of he has a bit of a rapport with Rome Dutt. It's like Varlic was the one that Rome Dutt hung around with. I also a credit to Mary Tam's costume. I think that's absolutely fabulous, and I love all the stuff about the 7 holy rituals, and that's only 3. So many lovely lines in this, actually, and of course, yes, because the Doctor and Romana are behind as well, because they still haven't. I suppose it's important that the plot has a slight problem here, because it's important that the Swampies have seen Kroll, in order that they're ahead of everybody, because they've seen Kroll, but the Doctor hasn't, Romana hasn't. The guys in the refinery have now, but it just means the placement, the big reveal, which would be amazing, isn't as much of a big reveal, because for the plot we've had to already have had the big reveal. So it's just, I don't know how he could have resolved it. I don't think he could have done. But I think it's a shame. But I do absolutely love that whole sequence, and I used to watch it over and over again, actually, when I first got it on video. I loved the closing moments of this episode where there's just something very Doctor Who-y to me. I mean, gosh, John Abernethy, having done Last of the Mohicans, he's also doing a story where there's some noise in a pipeline, and something thumping noise in a pipeline, and something emerges from the water to suck people in, which, seeing as he was in Fury from the Deep, he must have just spent the whole of the Power of Kroll having a bit of deja vu. I wonder if he ever woke up all green as well. So look, I love that. Oh, there's something in the pipe. I'm having a listen. What is that noise? And then the bursting of it's very Doctor Who-y to me, even though it's not a thing that happens massively often in Doctor Who. I do like a tentacle. I do like, and I associate tentacles with Doctor Who, and a good tentacle, and that's a pretty good tentacle. It may not be the best tentacle. There's a pretty good one in Seeds of Doom, isn't there? I think it's better than the spearhead tentacles. Shall we have a tentacle lead table? Send in your tables of the best and worst tentacles of Doctor Who. There's one in Nightmare of Eden, isn't there? The one that the Doctor bites. But I like the tentacle bursting from the pipe and pulling Harg in. I think that's a great cliffhanger, and of course it ups the Kroll is not only on the move, he's now, he can now pop up anywhere. So what's my favourite thing about episode 2, though? I think it could be that cliffhanger, which I really like. It could be, the Swampies, and I've already picked an actor, but I do love John Abernethy, and I do love Carl Rigg, and actually, the fact that Scart, the sort of least important of the Swampies, is played by Frank Jarvis, who is another of those very recognisable character actors. I remember a friend of mine had watched The Knowledge, and there's a scene with Frank Jarvis, Nick Stringer, and one other. I can't remember who it was now, and my mate said, "Oh, and those 3 blokes in that scene, they're just those 3 blokes that were in everything, weren't they?" And I was like, "Yeah, you've recognised." There's a Nick Stringer, never did a Doctor Who, but he's another of those great sort of regular faces. I was very pleased when he became a regular in the bill. Frank Jarvis I saw him crop up in a Juliet Bravo the other day where he had about 3 lines, but then in other stuff he's a solid guest lead, and he's in the Italian Job as well, and he got an obit in the Guardian actually, so well done. I think Gavin Gorn wrote that. Well done for getting him that, because I've just struggled to get to get 2 in for people who I would say had better claims really, but it's a crowded market now. And Frank Jarvis, of course, Doctor Who fans, he's the captain in the War Machines, which I have already done, and he's got a bucket on his head in Underworld. So he has had quite an interesting Doctor Who career. So again, he's one of those names that was bouncing about on screens and in print in my youth, and he was even in Catterick, wasn't he? The Vic and Bob thing. So yeah, really interesting career. But Gary Russell told me an interesting story about Frank Jarvis, but it's Gary's to tell, not mine. Anyway, what's my favourite thing about episode 2? I think the much maligned Kroll model is very good as well. I think the problem with Kroll is that what has been chronicled is that Martin Patmore, the cameraman, was given the wrong advice, and he masked off the camera, so then they had no choice but to have that sort of line on the horizon. But it's actually not as bad as you think. If you did it now, you'd have different levels, so that it would not be the horizon was just this sort of cut flat line. But I remember reading about how bad it was and then seeing it and going, well, no, I can sort of see what they've done there. There are worse effects in Doctor Who, and actually the Kroll model I think is absolutely superb. But I think for episode 2 I will choose the cliffhanger. And I've got Rankin and Kroll in my back pocket because I may need them later. But let's see what Ian has chosen
for episode 2. It's got to be the fact that we just see Kroll on the horizon. It looks not like the best special effects right now, but 6-year-old me was absolutely enthralled and terrified, and it's and in a weird way I still think it stands up for the Kroll looks pretty good. Just the maybe it's the absolute straight line of the horizon that lets it down a little bit, but yeah, Kroll, I can just remember it so clearly.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much exactly what I said, and then I chose something else. It's one of those days. Yeah, it is, damn, because I was expecting to... I don't know why I thought he might choose that latest thing, as that was the first time we saw Kroll. It is a really, really good model. I still think the best thing about that is the way that John Abernethy throws himself on the ground in front of it, though. and then Varlet grabs him and goes, stop worshipping the squid. We've got things to do. It's funny because I think when I was young, the first time I saw this, I wasn't that interested in the Swampies. I thought they were quite boring. It was only when I got the joke that I liked them a bit more. Anyway, Kroll is a perfectly good choice, and it is not what I chose. So, surprise, surprise, I'm not doing very well in my choice of things. But that's to be expected because the odds are hugely against me. But actually, the odds are hugely against a Doctor Who fan enjoying the Power of Kroll, if you look at its place in the rankings, even in the season that it's in. But I am thoroughly enjoying it. I'm enjoying Ian enjoying it. And I'm hoping that if I do some good today, it's that a Power of Kroll doubter will look at it and perhaps look at it with a little bit of affection, because then something unloved and unwanted, and I'm not talking about me here, it's currently how I feel. Yes, in honour of that, something as unloved and unwanted as the Power of Kroll, that somebody somewhere sees some value in it. And we'll leave that metaphor there. Well, welcome back, everybody, because I am your Ranquin, and you are my squid. Because there was another song called The Power of Kroll, not Kroll, Love, at around that time. There should be like Equity, shouldn't it, where you can't have two songs called The Power of Love out at around about the same time. I remember at the time thinking that Jennifer Rush and Huey Lewis could have had a conflab, and not both released a song with the same title. Hated the Jennifer Rush one at the time. I'm rather fond of it now, but was furious that somebody who sounded like an opera singer was number one for 5 weeks. Why have I remembered that? Because I've been doing Power of Love / Power of Kroll wordplay in the previous 2 episodes. And why not carry on where I left off? I've had a break since episodes 1 and 2. And if anything, my week has got worse. How much professional rejection in 1 week is too much? Well, I'm currently putting that to the test. But look, you have come here to escape from whatever life is throwing at you, and I don't think it's fair to inflict what it's throwing at me upon you. You can get enough of having things thrown at you, and you are here presumably to hear somebody wanging on about Doctor Who, and I am going to wang on about episode 3 of The Power of Kroll, which I have to say, on a pretty turdy day the other day, gave me 50 minutes of plenty to think about and enjoy. And I hope that episode 3 is going to do the same, and it's not all going to fall to pieces. So I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1, and I'm selecting on BritBox, which means the circly thing will go around for 3. Here we go. So we are on episode 3 of The Power of Kroll. Alexa, volume 5. So we'll just get the volume down a little bit. Alexa, volume 4, I think even. Is she actually doing as I tell her? Is she listening to me at all? Alexa, volume 4. Even Alexa is rejecting me. Is this attached to Alexa? I think it is, yeah. Anyway, we'll cope. We'll cope. Alexa, volume 4. There, see, the music was too loud. Who'd have thought that the best that modern technology has to throw, particularly something that is all about volume, doesn't work when the volume is too high. And the only person that can turn down the volume is the thing that doesn't work. Anyway, let's not get into that. But it's worth saying, though, isn't it? Because I've been sort of whinging a bit in my head this week. But, looking at everybody who made The Power of Kroll in 77, 78, whenever it was, they didn't have... you couldn't just nip to the shops and get an avocado, could you? Trains anywhere probably took 4 or 5 days. I think certain places you could only get there by horse. There was no pesto. I mean, come on. So it's all relative. So before I decide that I'm getting too old, so old I'm going to sleep at the bottom of the swamp for 200 years and just fart, I have to grab life by the tentacles. In this case, watch the recap of The Power of Kroll, where Kroll has woken up, which is good news, because you don't really want to send soporific signals to the audience, and I do take note of the fact that there is a lot of John Leeson and Philip Madoc sitting around going, nothing's actually happening, which is not the best signal to send to an audience. I do like Haag being dragged down the pipe. I like all of this business. Now, I was thinking about Neil McCarthy. I think the Philip Madoc thing, I poo-pooed the idea a little bit. I mean, I think it's true that he thought he was playing Thorn, or had been offered Thorn, at which point this became clear. Sort of varies, but the original story as told was that he turned up on location expecting to be playing Thorn and said, "Oh, hello, Neil McCarthy. Well, are you playing Fenner then?" And Neil McCarthy went, "No, I'm playing Thorn." He went, "Really? I thought I was playing Thorn," and was perturbed to realise he was playing the second in command, and immediately thought, "Well, I better make him grumpy." Which is that, and that was one of those things that I think was even in a sort of fact file in an early Doctor Who weekly. So you sort of expect it to actually turn out to be not true, as a lot of things did that were sort of stories that stuck from those early days. But there seems to have been an element of truth in it. Although whether it was, but it certainly the timeline wasn't quite right in that Alan Browning was originally Fenner, so Madoc was called in quite late in the day, and maybe that's where there was a miscommunication. But Neil McCarthy definitely wasn't the only person offered Thorne either. He wanted Julian Glover, he wanted George Baker, so his casting ambition, Norman Stewart, was very sound. I love that line about the seventh of the holy rituals, and the way that Carl Rigg delivers that line about that one's not so bad. They just stick you down a hole and throw rocks at you. I think it is a brilliant line, and he plays it very, very well. I think he's not talked about often enough. Carl Rigg. I'm putting the subtitles on, so there might be a slight pause. Yes, so there might be a little bit of jiggery pokery there. If you're watching along, press pause for about 10 seconds. I am currently watching Tom Baker, Mary Tam, and Glyn Owen tied up by vines. How long does this take, says Romana. To die depends upon the sun. And Rom Dutt talks to Scart, who's played by Frank Jarvis, and also the only Doctor Who character named after a popular 1990s VHS video cable connector opera. Don't write in and say what other uses a Scart cable had. That's all I know them for doing. There will be younger people listening to this saying, what is a cable? What are wires? Everything we have is connected by the internet, which is why it always breaks and doesn't work properly and annoys me. But let's not get into the rigors of modern technology. Again, we're watching television from a time when, oh God, they didn't even have answer machines. I mean, they're primitives, not just the Swampies, but everybody in this compared to us. And yet, were they any less happy? I doubt it. Anyway, this is where Robert Holmes' flourishing of his sort of cynical disdain for religion, or at least those who abuse the power that religion gives them, I think is at its sharpest. Rankin, for all, and he's brilliantly cast, because they've cast an actor who can do this sort of stuff and make it work. As he, this is essentially what he does in Robin of Sherwood, except in Robin of Sherwood, it's not a joke. And I have a special relationship with John Abernethy. If you haven't witnessed my one-man show, Moths Ate My Doctor Who scarf, John Abernethy was an actor I just sort of started noticing things, and I knew he'd been in Doctor Who because I knew he was Carrington in Ambassadors of Death, and that was featured in an early Doctor Who magazine that I had. But then I noticed him in Robin of Sherwood, and it's a name that sort of sticks out, and he kept coming back because I sort of assumed that Herne the Hunter would only sort of be in the first episode, but he was always around in Robin of Sherwood. He actually does this stuff very well. This sort of quite quiet and dour and dry scene, but he has the gravitas to do it. He's a really good actor that was really valuable in the 70s, because he can do the kind of stuff that I'm not sure a lot of actors could manage to pull off today. It's that sort of mixture between sort of declamatory, stagey stuff, but making it sort of seem real and not hokey. Although he then says lines like, "Your mind is bent, Dryfoot," absolutely, totally straight, and is sort of funny. Oh, and the Doctor's got a line about you can't hypnotise people with narrow eyes. So the whole thing, to get a bit of exposition out, was the Doctor trying to hypnotise him, which is a witty way of getting some of the necessary dialogue out. Oh, the Doctor wasn't doing it, so we all sit down and explain the plot to each other. He had an ulterior motive. I like that. I think that's nice. So Abernary kept cropping up on things, and then I remember getting very excited by a character called Van Lutyens in Fury from the Deep, because I read about him in the Doctor Who magazine review of Fury from the Deep, where it sort of gave away his fate, which I was slightly annoyed by, but I was just excited that it was a character with a foreign name. That seemed to be really grown up, and the idea that an important character would be somebody from overseas, and that would fit, that's multicultural crew and all that sort of multiracial crew and all that sort of thing. That quite excited me, and I sort of thought, who would they have got to play it? Would they have got a genuine Dutchman? And then I finally got hold of a Doctor Who program guide, and lo and behold, it was John Abernethy, which then made sense, because I don't think he's got a foreign sounding name, but so he's probably got a foot in both camps, and that's very exciting. As it is, I think he just has some sort of accent, but he was multilingual, John Abernethy. He could speak Russian. So anyway, he was just somebody that kept popping up, and then I took a fancy to a girl at university, and we were chatting away as a group, actually, and Doctor Who popped up, and she said, "Oh, my uncle's been in Doctor Who," and I said, "What's he called?" She said, "Oh no, you never have heard of him. He wasn't a regular. He's called John Abernethy." And I went, "He's my favourite actor. I love him. He's blah, 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 blah." And eventually we had a little liaison, Rosie and I. But I don't know, timing and taste on her part scuppered anything long term. But I'm very fond of her, and she actually got me a signed picture of him. I'd written to him by that point anyway, and had an interview with him in Doctor Who magazine. Or actually, I think that I'd written to him prior to that, but the interview was published later. So anyway, I looked him up in Spotlight, and he'd won an Emmy nominated for Last of the Mohicans. That's pretty good. Not many Doctor Who actors have an Emmy nomination. And then he pops up as the butler in the Ferrero Rocher commercial. He's even got a couple of lines in The Godfather 3. So yeah, big fan of John Abernethy. So then I was quite surprised to see him play a part that hadn't really excited me much in the book. The Swampies didn't excite me much in the book anyway. They're difficult sorts of characters to pull off. So I think the fact that they even vaguely work is sort of down to the commitment of the actors, really, and some of the jokes in the script that didn't really communicate themselves to me in the book, certainly. But funny enough, when I first watched this, I was much more interested in these sorts of scenes than I was in the swampy ones. And actually, I think, he's sort of squinting as we say, "Oh, what's going on here?" I really, because John Leeson, of course, is he's not Martin Jarvis, who suddenly became unavailable, but he's also free because he's under contract for the whole of the season, and K9 cannot be in the Power of Kroll. So you suddenly got an actor who's being paid for, so you go, yay, hoik him in. And as I say, I adore John Leeson for many reasons, and if I needed a slightly charmingly pedantic vicar to put his foot in it in a murder mystery, or even a sort of jester type character to provide a bit of sort of levity and distraction, I would go for John Leeson. Somebody staring at a scanner screen, emphasising how terrifying everything is getting. I am not sure I would tick those boxes in John Leeson's Spotlight book. But Neil McCarthy as Thorn, I was thinking about him before I started this book, because I'm not a massive fan of what he does here. He doesn't do anything wrong particularly. He just doesn't quite work. But of course, he'd been in Who Pays the Ferryman around this time, in which he's excellent. It's a sort of drama set on Crete, and with Jack Hedley, and it's really good. But the sort of local Greek head of police is played by Neil McCarthy, and his accent is so good that it convinced a lot of people he actually was, he was local, he was a native, and it's a really good performance. So he was known at this time. This rain is good, and credit to the actors standing about in the rain. Well done, Carl Rigg, who has to wait till the end. So I like the inhospitable locale. That's a nice shot of McCarthy sort of looking out of the window. It's pretend rain there, but that's okay. It's okay. A really big daddy. They call it Big Daddy, don't they? It doesn't. I think Philip Madoc calls it Jemima, doesn't he? He calls something Jemima. But but there's nice little thunder effect. But the story has kind of ground to a halt a little bit here, hasn't it? Because we've seen Kroll, but the Doctor and co have been tied up for quite a long time. It could blow us all apart, and that would be massively inconvenient. And we'd have to probably call out somebody to change our tyres. And the Doctor's going to do something that might defy the audience. I mean, look at Tom Baker; he looks absolutely magnificent. He can he can pull off this sort of thing. He's going to shatter the glass, isn't he? With his, I mean, how do we feel about that, everybody? He's never done it before. Doctor Who has never done it before or since. But it shows a certain amount of ingenuity, because it's not just that the glass has been shattered. The glass has been shattered in order to wet the vines and the wood and make everything contract, blah, blah, blah. So it's not just the one party piece. It has a sort of knock-on effect that works particularly to the jeopardy that they find themselves in. But it's not like you could have seen that coming. It's not like they've planted it earlier. So I'm not. I'm not sure how I feel about. I'm also less sure how I feel about Tom Baker's. What are they? They galoshes. Is that the top of his boots or the bottom of his trousers? It's a funny old setup there. Come on then, off they go. So yeah, there's odd. I was very much enjoying this yesterday. I've given I think 2 or 3 actor biographies. Oh, now this is a bit more of Romana, because I watched the Rebus Operation the other day for an excellent podcast called A Wheezing Groaning Sound, and it struck me how much in Romana's first appearance she does all this sort of psychoanalyzing of the Doctor and putting him down with intelligence and long words, and that was obviously a sort of character trait that they'd decided she should have, and that she did it a little bit there about saying this is displacement anxiety. Yes, and I'm sorry. The reason I paused was because the suggestion of Stephen Shapansky from Radio Free Scarrow. I've started putting the subtitles on the episodes because I sometimes have to stop and go, I missed that line of dialogue. Whereas if I have subtitles on, and actually I find myself increasingly watching stuff with subtitles these days anyway. I remember I was in Edinburgh when doing a show in Edinburgh when doing a weekend at the Stand when The Doctor's Wife was on, and I watched it and enjoyed it, and then I came back and watched it with my stepson, who I then lived with, who is deaf, and he hadn't seen it, so we watched it together, and of course we watched it with subtitles. I understood it much better because I could hear some of the dialogue over the music. But that's the mix. Stuff is mixed really oddly these days. I can never see. As technology gets better and better, I don't think it. I mean, when this was on, we had I'm sure a portable black and white television that you had to twist a dial to get from channel to channel on. Again, we're looking at this stuff, and it doesn't look especially old-fashioned to me in the way that it probably would to, say, my kids if they watched them. The mix of film to VT, the VT-ness of it, lots of different things would look dated. But again, you sort of put yourself in the position of the people there. A lot of the things that we take for granted are would be utterly alien. And yet, and that means the technology they were making it with was, less than probably we have in our homes. But that said, now Tom's got much bigger, longer boot things going on here. He's got different. I'd never noticed that before. He's got very different boots on location to those he has in the studio. He's got boots going up to his. I was going to say ganglion. The top of his thigh. But the modern technology we have, I'm doing this. I'm broadcasting using my telephone. Essentially, I've got a decent mic and stuff like that. But the idea that you could put stuff out there without somebody at the BBC liking you or whatever. Now I like this bit because again, Fenner showing that he's not a completely unpleasant character, and he's he's using his reasoning. They're not being, because they've done a lot of sitting around. Unfortunately, Neil McCarthy do have problems. Yeah, he doesn't quite get. I don't think he gets that line quite. Does he? I thought he fluffed it, but it didn't seem like he fluffed it there. But he doesn't quite get the line. Give the line the meat that it needs there, really, considering it's piggybacking on Madoc saying the Swampies have got some problems. But I really like Fenner going, look, I don't really like the Swampies, but he's not wild about the idea of them all being eaten by a giant squid. He's got a fantastic face, Neil McCarthy. He had acromalchi, is it? I mean, an archaic term is giantism, isn't it? But apparently, Casey Manning told me he was among the funniest people that she ever worked with. And a real sort of gentle, and it's a cliche, I hope it's not a pejorative term now, a sort of gentle giant. But and of course he's in Zulu, which is one of my favourite films. He's one of the Welsh guys, and he's one of the ones that gets to go on location, because not all the actors in Zulu are actually out there on location. Lots of them that stay in the hut. I love this. I never got to go to South Africa, but I'll do a podcast on Zulu. So that's the end of Glyn Owen. The plot had kind of run out of what to do with Glyn Owen, but it's the Doctor being very cold, which Tom Baker can be, which always surprises me, and I'm not sure I like. But that was the Doctor that I grew up with. But none of that really registered with me. It was only when I rewatched when I was older. I mean, I watched Full Circle. I remember Full Circle, but I don't remember him being quite so dismissive of Varsh's death as he actually is in the episode. And that sort of, that thing with Rome Dutt of, well, I told him not to move. I love the ground getting sucked underneath. I don't even know how they did that. I think that's terrific. Finally, this episode has started to sort of pick up a bit, and I think it's the end, isn't it? So basically, we haven't seen Kroll for the whole episode, even though he woke up last week. So that I think critics of this story, might use episode 3 as an example of, well, everything does grind to a halt a little bit. But I think that's terrific. Now, I think the version that we have now, that's Philip Bird. He's brilliant in the Sapphire and Steel with the photographs as the faceless guy. And he's had a wonderful career. I've seen him do Shakespeare, still working. And I sort of know Philip a little because I did him for Who's Round, because it was very hard to get people for Power of Kroll. So I got one of the extras, but he's an extra who's had an amazing career. But Philip should really have had a credited part in Doctor Who by now. But this is very, very early in his career. And it was because he was sort of local, I think. But then he did such a good job, they sort of take him to the studio. He's a lovely man, Neil, but Philip. But he's had a superb career, still going strong. But uncredited in this because he is an extra. Poor old John Leeson's right at the bottom of the credits, even though, but it just goes to show, good parts in those days that, it's worth turning up whoever you are. I mean, I think Frank Jarvis may have been slightly annoyed because he doesn't get to do an awful lot and spends the whole thing green. But I think that shot, the shot of Kroll, I think, is probably because I think BritBox has been given some fairly decent prints, and I think there was some work done for the DVD to to maybe reduce the harshness of the line between the Horizon and Kroll, which is a big fault with that whole shot. And it was the big. It's the big heart-rending compromise when you've got a great location, that lovely stuff of the Doctor and the boat and the water, and you've got the fantastic that model of Kroll is excellent. Nobody talks about how good that model of Kroll is. It's an absolutely fantastic model, and it's got water and it's got texture and it's got it's moist, it's organic looking, it's a decent size, it's got lovely detail, it doesn't look like a puppet, but it's all ruined by the fact that nobody can quite get over the fact that it's obviously the camera has sort of shut off the horizon, and there's that big sort of line where the grass cuts off, and Kroll in Ealing Studios is sort of transported in. But I think that the actual model of Kroll is magnificent. But that's already been chosen by Ian last week. So do you know what my favourite bit is? Do I have to be honest? Well, I'm not going to win this. And do you know what? Sometimes it's just all about... Yeah, do you know what my favourite bit is? It's a line, and it's the delivery of the line, and it's the existence of the line, which there's no way Ian is going to choose it. But it always tickles me, and it's partly because it's funny, but it's partly because it's funny and played very straight. So it's sort of, I could just be choosing another actor, but I try and resist that. I think it's Valek's line about, when they go through what the different death rituals are. She says, what's that one? And he says, they just stick you in a pit and throw rocks at you. I think he delivers it brilliantly. I think it's very, very funny. And I've always liked it as a little moment. And you know what? Sometimes small, beautiful things is what Doctor Who is all about. And in an episode where, as I said, I think I slightly struggled there, which is why you got My Life with John Abineri by Toby Hadoke. I like Fenner's reaction to the fact that Kroll's moving towards the swampies, but it's a fairly static episode, that and the big sequence of which is quite fun because Tom Baker's so good, and I like the bit where he tries to hypnotise Ranquin, especially the payoff of that. That's quite good. I could have chosen that bit, but especially as that sort of got out of with a kind of cheat of going, oh, okay, the Doctor can opera sing his way out of this. Actually, I even say that I kind of like that. Saying it out loud, enunciating it, makes it sound rather fun. And Tom Baker is on very good form in this, I think, in a kind of Tom Baker swaggering around, rather confidently daring anybody to give him a directorial note. But I am. Do you know what? I don't care. I'm not going to win this one anyway. I'm going to choose Valek's line about the holy ritual where they throw rocks at you, and Carlrig's delivery of it, just because I like it. And I doubt there'll ever be anybody making notes and making an official history of HappyTimes and places, and one day somebody reading what I chose for episode 3 of Power of Kroll going, did he really? I can't believe it. So I'm going to live in the moment and go, I like that bit. What has Ian chosen? Ian, by the way, on the video will come out much later than the audio. But I do video versions of these if you want to go on YouTube and have a look to see what absolute state I'm in, because it's the end of the day and I'm just loafing about and brush my hair. Ian is wearing a shirt not unlike one my mum gave me when I was about 16, and I've still got, because they made things to last in those days. In fact, I've probably still got some clothes that were made at the time that the Power of Kroll was on, and I don't think any of my newer clothes that are made around the time I'm doing this will still be around in 40 years. But that is another comment on the fact that highfalutin new technology actually isn't all that. And so maybe I need to connect with my inner Swampy. Anyway, there was that guy called Swampy, wasn't there? Who was the eco warrior fella. I remember my friend Francis is an actor. We were doing a talk at the Royal Exchange after a show once, and we'd do a Midsummer Night's Dream, and Puck was dressed a bit like a sort of an eco warrior, and Swampy came up for some reason, and Francis said, "Oh, you hear that Swampy died?" We went, "No, really?" He said, "Yeah. He had a heart condition. They offered him a bypass. He wouldn't accept one." It's a lovely joke. But I wonder if Swampy's name was influenced by the fact that the Swampies, anyway, you might not even know who I'm talking about. He was an eco-warrior that was protesting against the extension of, I'm presuming, some sort of bypass. The details are lost to me because I remember things like which extras are in The Power of Kroll. Right, what's Ian chosen? I said more in the post-Power of credits of Power of Kroll, I think, that was of any value than I did through the whole of the episode. I don't know what that says about it or me. Right, Ian. I'm boring you to death with the 8th holy ritual of tedium. Ian has chosen something that's going to take him 59 seconds to say.
For episode 3, I'd have to go for the execution. I love Robert Holmes for the way he seems to come up with some pretty grim executions, considering this is a family show. It's up there with the death by steam in the Sunmakers. But yeah, having the Doctor and his friends on a rack where plants are drying out in the sun and stretching their spines till they snap, it's pretty brilliant. I remember being kind of thrilled in that way little boys are by death and pain. But yes, although it does seem to me that it's a very stupid execution not to have a guard on. But the Swampies are obviously too trusting in their gods, as we see.
Now, that, you see, there was me going, there wasn't much to talk about that episode, and I couldn't see the wood for the Swampies, because it is an excellent execution. Thank you to him for pointing that out. And I think it's weird, because it's never really grabbed me, that scene, but partially, I suppose, because I know, they're going to get out of it. But that's the case with all Doctor Who, isn't it? And it is actually an ingenious way of dispatch. And it's obviously well conceived and thought through. He obviously quite likes the detail of sort of torture, but it is also a bit like, I'm going to leave you with the slow-moving laser beam, and you will die soon, but I will not be here to witness it. Which, so in a way, Robert Holmes could be saying, yes, I know that, and I'm doing it as a joke. And then you go, but how far should the joke go before it's too jokey to then be believable jeopardy? But I do think it's an ingenious thing, and I didn't mention in episode 1 where Rome Dutt talks about the worm that sort of burrows into your ankles and eats its way out of your brain. He loves all of that sort of thing that, again, just gives a little bit of colour, a little bit of peril. I always like it in Doctor Who when the environment is perilous, because that's just a nod to the fact that you just don't turn up somewhere where it's a bit like this, but everyone's got different hats on. And I think especially in the 60s, jungle planets are deadly, for example, and all of that. So, and I like all of that. The fact that the idea that just landing somewhere could get you killed, because we may have worms and blue tits, but they've got burrowing creatures and thorns that turn you into deadly plant things, and I love all of that. So I should have concentrated more on the stretching on the rack than I did on actors' CVs and my parts therein. But that's why this process is quite useful, because because of Ian's contribution, I have a newfound respect for something that's was hiding in plain sight. I've seen this episode loads of times. I know that bit, but actually being sort of having a sort of mental nudge about it, you go, no, that is good and that is fun. And that's why hopefully we revisit these things, and hopefully listening to me blathering on might remind you of something that you noticed but hadn't thought about last time you saw it, or whatever. But for whatever reason you're here, and I'm sure it's not to listen about how terrible my week's been, that has been part 3 of The Power of Kroll. I hope it wasn't too much of a stretch, and I'm going to see and speak to you in part 4, wherever you reach for me, I'm going to do all that I can. I wish I knew another line from the Jennifer Rush song to have ended with. Well, everybody, welcome. The Swampies most certainly do have some problems. So does everybody. It's part 4 of The Power of Kroll. Not the most celebrated story of, well, even the season that it's in which it's something of an anomaly, being, I think, the sort of most traditionally sci-fi-y. Oh, again, in fact, it's very sci-fi-y, but I still feel it has a sort of stylistic adherence to, the likes of Tara and Rebos, and it's a funny old season 16, but I think stylistically, Kroll is out there on its own. It's a refinery under siege, isn't it? And let's see how they're getting on in the final episode. I have it on BritBox. I have it on DVD as well, in a beautiful box set. I remember getting it and opening it up and going, oh, they've really put some thought into this. I had a wonderful few days gorging on what seemed an embarrassment of riches when that DVD came out. God, lots of water's passed under the bridge since then. But now, here we are, where I can just flick a switch on my old TV projector, and all of Doctor Who, or most of Doctor Who that's available, is just the press of a button away. So I'm going to press play on part 4 in 3, 2, 1. And is the circly things going round? Because here we go. You are playing. So there we go. Doctor Who theme, it says on the subtitles. I have the subtitles switched on. It's rated NR, which stands for No Ranquin. So here we have Power of Kroll, episode 4. Kroll has having been absent for most of last week, where Ian Winterton, my guest, brilliantly chose something that I love. I love that bit of the ground getting sucked underneath. I wish Glyn Owen's death is pretty good, but he is sort of pushing himself. It's a shame. The tentacle action has some great potential to be slightly better than it is, but it's okay. It's not embarrassing. It's not John Pertwee gurning at the end of Spearhead, wrapping himself around or whatever. It's okay, but I think it's just a 5% off being really good, which is, so then you go, it's a slightly missed opportunity. But I love I love all this the swamp is getting down to the ground and doing that thing that people who are tracking people do. I like all of that sort of stuff. Love the sheer amount of water that you get from being on location. Why don't we love this location? It's so unlike what we usually get in Doctor Who. Occasionally we go by the seaside, where of course the monsters have to inevitably rise from the sea. But I think this is a really good, and that is a brilliant model. Great tentacles. I love its moving mouthy thing. The wonderful Philip bird. Its sort of gaping maw is very mobile and doing stuff. I like anything that has somebody getting sucked under the water. Is I think always a good moment. I'd have liked to have seen, it's a bit of a cliche, but I'd have liked to have seen his hand going under like you do with the Decider Draith in Full Circle. But that model is super duper. Tom Baker's costume is brilliant. I love his brooches. I'm sure it's very easy to fall in love with Mary Tam. She's just the most beautiful woman. And what's really interesting, I think, one of the joys of that Key to Time box set was hearing Tom Baker and Mary Tam getting on so well on the commentaries, and realising that for all her Ice Maiden, looks and Estonian princess mythology about her, she was sort of a Yorkshire lass with a dirty laugh. I'm sad I didn't know Mary Tam, because she seems to have been a right old hoot. Now this shot sadly doesn't work at all. I quite like the tentacles coming out of the out of the village, but that shot where Kroll is towering above the village simply doesn't work, sadly. But is that the reason we don't like Power of Kroll? Because there's been stories that have been let down by. I had a whole thing in one of my shows that I cut in the end about the giant rat. Each Doctor Who story has one thing that kind of ruins it. That means you can't quite, because I always used to judge Doctor Who stories on whether I could show them to the general public. I don't know what I thought I'd be doing. Drive a, oh, would you like to watch this, and then fall in love with it. But I did genuinely always view it. I think it's a thing about approval, isn't it? I might talk about this because I think it's an interesting point interesting alert. Whenever I say interesting, I think I'm probably not saying anything remotely interesting at all. I use it so often it proves one thing that isn't interesting is my vocabulary. But I actually like all of this stuff. The confrontation between Dugin and Thorn. I like the fact that Dugin is actually a plant, for an agent for the Sons of Earth, or is he? Because again, when I first sort of read, I think it's in a Doctor Who quiz book or something. It said Dugin is an agent for the Sons of Earth, but actually that's sort of what Thorn says to justify killing him. He actually says, Dugin says, they're not cranks, which just he might just be sort of sympathising, or he's been secretly subscribing to Sons of Earth Weekly or something, but that doesn't mean he's necessarily a card carrying member. He follows them on Twitter, but he doesn't retweet them. Now that's an interesting thing because I have friends who get very cross with other friends because of who they follow on Twitter. You go, well, anyway, that's a conversation for a different day. I think Fenner's just unfollowed Thorn, but I like that. I like it when things get a bit high octane in a base, and all the shouty men, I'm taking command, you bastard, and all of that. Now again, that's reasonable, but it still doesn't quite work. And Ranquin's been there. Now I adore this scene. This is brilliant. This is Twitter. This is people doubling down. Where you go, I'm gonna counter what you say with a fact. What is a single life? Newell was killed. What is a single life? So that's his. That's his. But doesn't he also have? And that was a test of our faith. There's all the reasons for the giant squid eating them are justified on religious grounds, and I think that's terribly, terribly funny. And my God, don't people still do it today? And I'm not just talking about religion. I think it's very easy to sort of poke fun at religion now, and actually, I think that gets a lot of people off the hook who go, well, look at me, I'm poking fun at religion because it's silly, it's believing in something that isn't there. Now, I'm not a religious person, but I see a lot of people who think they're being very clever, patronising religious people who are equally messianic or zealous about their own belief systems, and equally sort of manipulate actuality in order to justify it, or bat it off with some inane and unnecessary irrelevant comparison, or a lot of whataboutery. This is a terrible set. I know Don Giles, the set designer, I think there was a memo saying, please can Don Giles not work on Doctor Who again. That cutout in the wall is very, very careless. But I remember the first time I saw it, where Tom Baker hits the rocket silo wall with a hammer and it wobbles. I love this bit though. I don't know why. I love somebody bravely going about to press a button and getting shot, and that's exactly what happens here. And I do quite like the look of surprise that John Leeson does when he kills me, and it's not too coy about the sort of death scene. There's no blood or anything like that, but that's fine, because I remember in the book of Tomb of the Cybermen, Viner's death scene, which is a pretty similar thing, him going, I'm going to press this button, and somebody saying don't. And in the book, it's the fussy little man sort of holds his own against Eric Klieg, and then Klieg shoots him, and there's a look of surprise on his face, and it sort of reminds me of that's not like that in the TV version. It's a lot more perfunctory and quick, but actually the book version of Viner's death in Tomb of the Cybermen is very like what you get in Power of Kroll. And talking through that, Tom Baker just hit a control panel with a hammer, and the wall just it really has been flung together. And if you look at the sort of entry ramp into the set, it's a very high angle. That's well, it's not particularly practical, difficult to walk up and down, I would say, but also really, really tatty. And Don Giles was still designing stuff in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, I think. I don't know that he's ever been interviewed. I don't know if he's around. And I love Madoc in this, staring intently at the screen. He'd still be alive now, wouldn't he? And I'm reporting you for. I love. See, and he says, yeah, you don't kill a man because you think he belongs to the Sons of Earth. So it's not. So I think going into this story, I had it in my head because of what I read somewhere that Dugin is definitely a plant from the Sons of Earth. But I think that's not as clear here, and deliberately so. I think that's I quite I think it would be too much of a thing if he was actually an agent from the Sons of Earth. I just quite like it that he's somebody that is, sympathetic to their. We've had the seed planted that there are people who are sympathetic to the Swampies and don't like the methods of what's going on with the refinery. Then he's it would work equally well if he was an agent. I quite like, yeah, but it seems to me slightly less obvious that they've gone for the suggestive route. Here we have the. Aren't you going to tell us not to try anything? Again, Tom sort of being sort of slightly cocky and obtuse with authority, but also with the conventions of the genre. Don't make any sudden moves. And Neil McCarthy, I think, laudably just keeps a straight face and carries on, but it's slightly awkward. I do think the Swampies look better on film. I think they look better in their own temple. They look quite an odd contrast to the refinery, but maybe that's the point. This is the. I mean, they are literally green, aren't they? It's not easy being green. They are. They are a sort of verdant chlorophyll. Perhaps they have chlorophyll running through their veins, in contrast to the sort of grey functionality of the refinery works. If you wanted to be pretentious about it, which I clearly just did, I still like the fact that Varlic is a bit like, come on, mate, you're talking rubbish. I love that till he has eaten of their souls. He does all that stuff so well. Hero of television, John Abernethy. I like this, doesn't he? It doesn't Tom make is that necessary? Philip Madoc goes, wasn't me. Yeah, well, not me, and not me. Great, and I don't know. I just think Philip Madoc's character in this is reacts to that whole situation much better than that sort of second string character normally does in these sorts of situations. And I don't know if it's maybe Madoc threw in a couple of lines or suggested a couple of lines, but it just elevates some sort of typical Doctor Who situations above what they were. I think I just saw John Leeson move then. Maybe saving you for pudding. I love... and this... Oh, yes, this is Thorne's death, which is... you see a little bit of blood on his hands. But unfortunately, it's so quick. I say unfortunately because that would be quite a nice talking point, because actually Thorne is the main bad guy, really. And he's just been killed, and there's quite a bit of the episode to go. What do we get this time? The 8th Holy Ritual. Tom Baker's there trying to mimic John Abernethy's hand movements, which I think is a bit cheeky, but they're all baloney. I like. He's always teetering on the edge of whether what he's doing is acceptable or a step too far, I think, Tom Baker. But I think that's the price you pay for having an alien genius as your lead character and lead actor. That is such a good joke. Yes, they're about to get eaten by the thing, and he goes, right, what's your answer to this, big chief? All the answers, and he very slowly gets to his knees and starts praying. That is such a funny joke, and Abernethy does it with such sort of conviction and welly. That's nice. The tentacle smashes through the window. It's a shame that the wall wobbles. The sets. I mean, this is as you know, I reject the cliche of Doctor Who having wobbly sets, in the sense that you watch anything from around this time and the scenery is scenery. And actually, I think often Doctor Who's production values are much better than much more expensive shows around it. It's just that he's been asked to do space, not a hospital corridor or whatever. This model is great. The Refiner is a bit wobblier than I'd remembered. although the plot for part 3 was a bit wobbly than I'd remembered. But yes, I still haven't quite finished. Thorne's death is a bit sort of like it's run out of things for Thorne to do, so he gets killed. But it's a slightly muddled scene, isn't it? I mean, you have to know where you're looking for you to see, what's happened to him and the blood. And why is it important to see the blood? Well, they'd gone to the trouble of getting a blood bag, so you want to say, I like Tom Baker punching his head as if to say, yeah, I've had enough of Ranquin now as well. But that's everybody is. I think the joke that Ranquin is pitched perfectly. Is that he's relentless in his god-bothery, and it just goes to show how zealotry makes people blind to facts. And again, that is not necessarily me attacking religion, because I see a lot of non-religious people adhering to their truth, and doubling down. This is Ranquin essentially doubling down, isn't it? Rather than just going, yeah, do you know what? I was wrong. It's a giant squid. This is him going, no, he's a god, and I'm going to be absolutely fine. And I think you need a cracking actor to stand in front of a tentacle and deliver all of that nonsense. But look at that wall is wobbling to heck. But I suppose it is being crushed by a giant squid, so we can kind of accept that. But Don Giles and his only Doctor Who, I think, can you phone in a set? I think just get some cardboard and some tinfoil, and I got a couple of pallets out the back. I don't know why I imagine him just with a fag, just going, yeah, I've got a wheelbarrow, turn that upside down and put a bit of 4x2 on it. Yeah, go pub. He was probably terribly refined and going, I wish I was doing Julius Caesar at the Oldbury, and instead I'm doing a refinery and something called Doctor Who. He's probably neither of those things. But send in your pictures of what you think Don Giles looks like. But I don't think he's ever been interviewed, which is often a sign that somebody doesn't want to talk about it. But there's definitely a memo from Graham Williams going, we don't want this guy again. What he did for us was shocking, and that's unusual. And he's a staff member at the Beeb. But it's interesting that he'd never done a Doctor Who prior to that, because most people who are doing Doctor Who in the 70s usually turned up or been around. And he certainly never comes back. I think this is pretty effectively done as well. We're on film, and we're just seeing bits of the close up of Kroll's hide and a couple of tentacles. I think that's all very well done on film. And Tom Baker's very good at gaping in peril and pain, and knowing that we're getting to the end of the episode, so he has to give it a bit of intense. He's much better at gurning is wrong. Pertwee gurns, but I think Baker, grimaces with high drama, and then that disarming smile. Look at that! Don't you just love that guy? Now, and I think is Mark Hardy. That was who is the cyber lieutenant in the 80s. Is one of the Swampies. I think that was him that we just saw. And I know that. Because most of the extras on film weren't then brought to the studio because they were local to the swamp. But I think Philip Bird and maybe Mark Hardy, I think they were maybe brought to studio. I could be wrong there. It doesn't matter. Let's not get too carried away with which extras went there, because the only person who cares is me, and I don't care enough to spend too much time potentially being wrong about it. But certainly one of the swampy extras is Mark Hardy, the 80s cyber lieutenant. So the plot's kind of finished now, so they need to go, right, something's blocking the orbit shots, but the orbit shots have been set up since the very beginning. So they are a thing, but it just does seem a little bit of odd extra tension. But it means it's worth Philip Madoc turning up, because the other two main guest stars are both dead. Thorne's been killed about 40 minutes ago, and John Abineri has been eaten by a tentacle. So it means that Madoc gets slightly more to do than your traditional second in command. Is that he at least gets to impart the sort of final threat, which probably explains why he didn't actually just go, really, I'm not been doing this. And he really has made an impact. So well done, Philip Madoc, glowering throughout the whole thing and being brilliant. On 000, there's a lot of close-ups of that bad clock, aren't there? He's so good, Tom Baker, isn't he? He's so good at he knows exactly what to do, and he also knows exactly how to undermine it, and he skirts between doing both. You do feel a bit sorry for Fenner here. I like the fact that they sort of so he's sort of left glowering at these. I don't think Fenner's going to live the natural life, but I quite like the fact that these guys sort of surround him threateningly. It's certainly not it's not an easy piece there, is it? I suppose they could. They could kill him. They've been hating the Dryfoots for the whole thing. But that's not what we're supposed to think. It's a sort of cozy comedy, sort of, he's been left with the Swampers who don't like him. But, if this was real, you would sort of go, at the spear-wielding guys who don't like the refinery guys, they're going to kill this guy because they could. But, I like... and the idea that Kroll is the reason Kroll is an extra giant squid is because Kroll has swallowed the key to time. So it's a very clever use of the key to time. I like it in Androids of Tara when the key to time has got out of the way straight away. That's rather fun. I like the fact that they sort of mix it up a little bit. But I also like the fact that because the key to time has whatever properties it has, that has led to the whole story. It makes it more than just we've got to find something in a display case, or the thing we've got to find exists completely actually outside the drama of the story that we find ourselves in. I like the fact that it's sort of it's organic to the it's actually part of the whole plotting. Look at that! Everyone gets a single caption credit. Those were the days. That's the sort of thing that really, I was going to say, gets me going there. I think I'm probably taking it a little bit too far, but I do like a single caption credit for the actors. Beautiful. Tony Harding visual effects. Yeah, Colin Laver's no longer with us. Yeah, as I say, we really struggled to get people for any sort of comments. There's not a documentary, is there, on the DVD. I wonder if we'll have a go at doing one on the Blu-ray. Looking for Kroll, looking for Don Giles, looking for Norman Stewart. As I say, I think Norman Stewart is dead. But I would like to have a more detailed story of the power of Kroll on the Who Talk commentaries that I do from Phantom Films, which you should check out. We have Mark Hardy and Philip Bird on Kroll, two extras, but they're both actors who are articulate and have a lot to say, and it was early on in their careers, so it's good. It's no compromise having them on, but it is an illustration of how few of the key players are around. Carl Rigg is around. I've desperately tried to get hold of Carl Rigg, but when I get an email address for him, it turns out that it's out of date. Because he was writing. I think Russell T Davies was in a writer's room with him early in his career with Shirley Cookley, and so he was around, but now for some reason very difficult to have traced. I've tried Equity, everything, and yet he was somebody that was still acting and stuff when I was growing up and reading credits, and I think he was in a Rockcliffe's Babies or something. So he didn't. It's not like he sort of stopped acting around Kroll time. He carried on and then was writing in television. So, but one of those people that seems to have sort of not be quite there without having quite vanished. It's a curious one. So anyway, what is it now? So we have to choose a favourite thing and a favourite bonus thing. Well, I think my favourite thing about episode 4 is the whole way that Robert Holmes satirises not just religion, but power. The whole Ranquin thing of every time somebody goes, he's destroyed our village, it's a test of our faith. He's eaten Jim. What is one life? He's always got an answer to divert from the facts staring him in the face. That's a giant squid that doesn't care if we live or die, and is going to destroy everything for its own selfish ends. Doesn't matter. I worship it. Which I think is a message that is as relevant today as it was then, and as I say, not just about a religion, although I think that's what Robert Holmes is doing here. And I also think one of the reasons I like it is because it's totally believable that Ranquin is that kind of character, but also, and even though he's absolutely stupid when it comes to his prostrating himself before Kroll, he's also, in terms of the village and the swampy setup and his dealings with Rom Dutt, he's a wily operator. He's a smart cookie. He's a manipulator. And I think that's quite clever, because it shows that somebody can be really stupid in some regards and yet very canny in others. And it's why quite often we have politicians, I've lost count of the amount of politicians we go, why does anybody vote for them? They're clearly not very nice and idiots. And yet they somehow manage to have something that means that they connect with people, and actually they make people quite happy to ignore the bit that's staring them in the face, that they are prostrate in front of a green tentacle and telling them lies. And people go, yeah, but I know that, and I don't care, because I still prefer what they're offering me to what you're offering. It's really interesting. Yes, Ranquin, full stop. I'll throw a little bit of John Abineri in there as well, although I'm not choosing an actor because I always do that. But yeah, Ranquin, the joke with Ranquin being the religious zealot that he is, the joke about how he treats every bad thing Kroll does, he manages to double down and get away with it. That whole, Ranquin and his religious fervour is my favourite thing about episode 4. And my favourite, are you all right, baby? I'm just finishing off. Cheryl Lee has just scooted past. I know she didn't get to watch part 4 of The Power of Kroll, and I think it's her loss. You missed John Abineri painted green praying to a tentacle. You see your sad American programs where everyone cries and learn things have a thing or two to learn from 1970s Doctor Who. And Philip Madoc glaring because he's not playing the part he thought he'd signed up for. It's marvellous. So that was my thing for part 4, and my overall thing. Now, I'm really annoyed that Ian has trumped me with choosing Kroll itself. Because I think that I had that one up my sleeve. So what is my bonus thing? It's not the sets, is it? Oh no. Well, is it a cheat to choose Robert Holmes? I think it probably is. Is it the fact that the key to time is part of? I think, or the swamps? Actually, no. Delta Magna. That's it. I do like the fact that the key to time is part of the plot, as it were. It's the reason that Kroll is a giant size. But I actually think nobody celebrates that setting enough. I think the swampy setting, the marshes of Delta Magna with its very believable. Of course, they're believable because they're real. Those rushes and that water and just the whole color palette that gives you, and the fact that we have real rain. So I think yes, the setting itself is as much of a star of the show as anything else. So those are my two things. What has Ian chosen?
A lot of things I like about Power of Kroll are things that could also be things that run throughout them, like the hovercrafts aren't just in episode 1. And similarly with this final one, it's the tentacles. Me and my brother just loved pretending to have a tentacle wrapped around us and be dragged down into the depths. I think there's something I always loved as a kid, in fact I love now, when you can tell something's fake but you're still excited. It's like we know Johnny Weissmuller is wrestling with a rubber crocodile in that river, and we still love it. It's the fact that you could kind of pretend to do it yourself. I love the old black and white Flash Gordons for a similar reason. They were so pretend that kind of added to the thrill of them. And I think Rubber Tentacles and Power of Kroll are definitely up there for me. But to pick something that's sort of my bonus thing, I'd have to say the location, because Power of Kroll isn't very well loved, and people like Philip Madoc, sort of are very down on it. Although they did cast Philip Madoc in completely the wrong role, didn't they? But I'd have to say the location is just brilliantly done. It actually looks quite alien compared to what we're used to seeing on location work in Doctor Who. It's not a quarry. It's not a shonky set. It's quite unusual looking river, which I believe is in Suffolk, with all those great big reeds and wide open skies. I think it's a definite boon, definite plus point of Power of Kroll. But yeah, that's me and Power of Kroll.
Thanks, Ian. I'll be telling you about Ian's social media and stuff in the closing credits, so do listen out for that. It's always nice if the people that have given their time, energy and expertise to this silly project of mine, which they all do for free, benefit from your follows and your interest in their work. One, I got a point. I pulled it out of the hat at the last minute. Well, I mean, most people, when they pull things out of the last minute, out of a hat at the last minute, actually win a thing, whereas I just haven't completely lost, which this week is a victory. Do you know what I mean? I mean, this week I'll take a reply to an email I've sent out begging for work as a victory. So one, yes, the setting, the planet, love it. Two, tentacles, excellent choice. I mean, I did allude to those in part two because I like the tentacle sucking Harg into the pipe. I love the cliffhanger. But Ian hits on a very important point about the fact that you are in collusion with the program makers. We knew stuff was fake. We knew we were watching an illusion. Now, people know they're watching an illusion now, but for some reason, we've decided that one of the conditions for enjoying something is that it has to be 100% believably, convincingly staged. I don't know when we decided that was a thing. We don't do that at the theatre. You sit in the theatre and you go, well, I accept the fact that that's not a wall, that's some curtains that people are walking off. But you just blank that out in your head because we are on your imaginary forces working. But for some reason, at some point, as viewers of television, we went, unless you convince us that what you're doing is 100% real, even though we know it's not real because we're at home watching it on our television, then you have failed. I don't think we won when we made that decision. I know what I'm watching is not real, partially because I know the names and CVs of all of the actors in it. But we know that. We know that when we're watching a thing. That bloke we're watching, Martin Freeman, was in a thing last night. We know that's Tim from The Office doing a very good Liverpudlian accent. In fact, that's part of the fun, watching an actor that we know from something else doing a different thing in something else. We like the mechanics of that. We're impressed when somebody convinces us in a different part. And yet we're not impressed when we go, well, that's a very convincing, if not 100% photo real recreation of a set or of a monster or whatever, which a lot of the monsters in Doctor Who are obviously men in rubber suits, but the Zygons are really good examples of men. Now, if you wanted to be ungenerous, you'd go, yeah, but that's a man in a rubber suit, so therefore I'm going to absent myself from enjoyment of this. Or you go, well, they've done a pretty damn good job and I will go along with the rest of it. And that tentacle thing, the Johnny Weissmuller thing that Ian was saying, is absolutely that. And in fact, acknowledging that you're gamely going along with something that is not 100% or that is at least, it's artificial, but it doesn't matter because your brain is wired to go, well, yeah, but it is a tentacle that is eating a man. I think you benefit. It's slightly less arrogant as well to sort of go, well, yes, unless you're feeding it to me, unless I lie back and you're just, getting nubile servants to feed it to me whilst wafting me and treating me like a king, I'm absolutely not going to accept what it is you're giving me. No, it's actually part of the fun of the process is doing the work, and especially, quite right, if you're a kid, and you're going, well, yeah, I can spot that that's not real, but that actually adds to the play, because it means that's the play that I do when I then recreate this at home or in the playground or with my brother or whatever. And of course, that play is the firing of the imagination. And if that imagination is fed, that imagination prospers, and a prospered imagination leads to the exercising of that imagination and creativity, which then breeds creative people. So that to me is a defense of its special effects and the way that television was done then, which of course, rather like Rankin, I'm preaching to the converted, but nonetheless I liked Ian's point about how actually perhaps the obviousness of the artifice of the tentacles, although they actually look pretty good to me, can be seen as an advantage. But anyway, so that's why the Power of Kroll is a beautiful thing. I said that at the end of episode 1, didn't I? Oh, damn. I enjoyed watching The Power of Kroll. That's not a sentence that's used very often. Thank you for watching it with me, if you were, or for listening to me watching it, which I still can't quite get my head around, but I'm very grateful that you're there. Sorry if I moaned in various introductions to these episodes, but I think it kind of proves the point that even under the most unlikely of circumstances, which is either a crappy week in the dark January or just watching The Power of Kroll, there is still much to be had, and that is the beauty of Doctor Who. You trawl the swamp and you still come up with a magic perspex cube, and if that's not a metaphor for life, I don't know what is. Bye.
Can I just say something before you sign off?
Yeah.
I love how passionate you are about Doctor Who.
Oh, thanks very much. I don't know if they can hear you. Shout it.
I love how passionate you are about Doctor Who. It's incredibly entertaining to observe.
Are you drunk?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's rude.
Oh, that's nice, isn't it? I just had a compliment. Oh, and now Bernard's come to join us. Well, thank you very much. You want to say goodbye to the listeners and viewers, Shirley Ann Houston?
Goodbye. I hope you enjoyed the man being eaten by the tentacle. I actually do want to see that.
Ah, I see. We've got her interest now. She knows there's a man being eaten by a tentacle. Do you want to say anything, Bernard? No, he's looking at me as though I'm an idiot. He might be onto something. Right, well, from Shirley and Bernard and I and The Power of Kroll, many happy times and places to you and yours. Ta-ta. Well, thank you ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Ian Winterton, who can be found on Twitter very easily. It's at Ian Winterton, capital I, capital W, but I don't know if that matters. I'm grateful to Ian and to the podcasts who make these patrons possible. Very grateful to the podcasts who make these patrons possible, but I'm grateful to the patrons too, who include Jefferson Ed, Say, Keith, Steve, if we're going to do it backwards, Robbie C, James Curray Smith, David Bickley, Tom White, Sean Ditchfield, Andy Kitching, Jim Trenowden, Legion Henderson, Rhys Williams, Peter the Speaker, James Parsons, Tim Smith, Ronin, who's really called Tom, DC, Robert Jewell, Mark Fidley Smith, Damien Timmer, and Ian Moore. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Would you like your name to be read out on the credits? Well, that's one of the bonuses you get if you are a patron, which you can be from as little as £3 a month if you go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. For that £3, or there are higher tiers as well, you get lured up the tier chain with tiny little sort of incremental joys, but pretty much all of the stuff is available at the lowest tier of £3 a month. And those extra special goodies are bonus releases, exclusive material, monthly AMAs, pictures of my dog, plus 6 months in advance for the Happy Times and Places releases, and a month or so for Indefinable Magic and Too Much Information. You also get an exclusive podcast, Far Too Much Information, plus interviews and other little goodies. I've occasionally raided my archive for, we actually returned something to the archive. I put out something that was to do with Patrick Troughton when he died, and somebody pointed out, oh, the BBC probably don't have that, and we got in touch with them, and they didn't. So it's a gold mine, all for £3 a month, and a 10% discount off that if you sign up for a year in one go. But the monthly commitment may be a bit daunting or just not what you fancy. You can also go to ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke, and there you can just make a donation whenever you like in this newfound way that we have of supporting the arts, if that's what I do can be described as, by throwing a few quid in my direction if you think I've earned it, or if there's a podcast you particularly like, or if you've seen a picture of me and I'm looking wan or thin. I wish I looked thin, or malnourished, or I've got scurvy. Whatever reasons you might buy people a coffee, scurvy is as good a reason as any. You can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke. But look, it's not really about the money. I am grateful that you listen, but what you can do that costs you nothing is to go to any of your online podcast suppliers, and makes them sound a bit dodgy, isn't it? Yeah, I've got Doctor Who podcast, a wellbeing podcast, and a frivolous one where some comedians take a wry look at hobbies. Whatever, you can, yours for a tenner. What you can do is, I've lost in my own metaphor. Go to your podcast supplier and go, can you give me something? Can you give me a podcast from I'm feeling a bit bored, and I'm doing Couch to 10K, and I need you to hit me up with something so I can just get through the day. You can whatever that was. And give me 5 stars for that sort of content. 5 stars. It's a world of extremes. No other star rating is good enough. It has to be 5 stars and a few lines of review, which really help to tweak up our algorithms and get them pointy, which means that more people will see them peeking up through the crowd, which means that people who might not be aware of these podcasts, who you think might like them, will avail themselves of them, and that makes all this effort worthwhile. So 5 stars and a couple of lines of positive review, iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, anywhere. And please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts as well. That just adds a bit of oil to the tweakage and means those algorithms, my goodness, they've never had such a good time. Please follow me on social media, on Twitter at Toby Hadoke, on Instagram at toby.hadoke, and on Facebook, it's just my name, but there are 2 pages. One is my personal page, which is too full, and I'm going to have to get rid of people on it that I don't know. Not get rid, but I'm going to have to slim it down, because all my work stuff is eventually going to be on what I think is called a page or a fan page. There's a black and white picture of me looking like that sort of faux apologetic thing that comedians do these days. Although it's not these days, it's quite an old picture. But let's not get into that. It's because it's landscape, and I quite like it. But look, yes, go to the fan page on Facebook, because that's where all my work stuff is. Because eventually I want to have a personal Facebook page, which was the only one I had for ages, where I can just put things for people that I know and have actually met. So if it's my work that you're interested in, please go do whatever it is you have to do, stalk, handcuff yourself to the Toby Hadoke page, and I would be very, very grateful. It's still me. You can still message me there, interact with it. I don't have people. I will never have people. I can't afford people, but it's just a way of me delineating work and, I was going to say pleasure, but I'm not really a pleasure kind of, just work and normality. So that's on Facebook, and these podcasts have their own Twitter feed as well, at Hadoke Podcasts. I'm also a stand-up comedian, and I do a comedy club called Excess Malarkey every Tuesday in Manchester at 8 p.m. So avail yourself of that, and that has a Twitter feed at Excess Malarkey, the letter X, the letter S, Malarkey, MALARKEY. So, these omnibuses, it is omnibuses, it's not omnibi, in the same way it's factotums, not factoti. and it's TARDIS is because TARDIS is TARDIS is an acronym. So any acronym, the plural is also just adding the es on the end. Anyway, have different closing and opening titles and different these bits. So there are actually missing bits on these from the originals. Why? Well, I don't know. I think because the omnibuses should just have the episodes all together. You don't want to be wading through the same sort of post credits plugs and things like that. So and these are supposed to be disposable. I don't know what these are supposed to be actually. These end bits. I think it was occasionally supposed to be a sort of quote or a funny line or a pithy sign off, and they've got longer and longer and longer. But anyway, the ones from each individual episode are gone. They are now missing from the omnibus, and I record new ones. I don't know why. I think it's because I have to put them together on a new file anyway. So I do a new introduction saying it's an omnibus edition, and because I was doing that, I do that here. And it's weird because I like things to be standardized, and I like things to all follow the same pattern and have the same logo, the same theme tune, the same format. I don't like messing about with the order of stuff. I like a certain amount of uniformity, and yet I also quite like, in those early days of Doctor Who where, one story would have a different way of doing the titles than another before everything got sort of formalised. I sort of quite like that and the anomalies that it throws up. So it's a weird sort of cognitive dissonance I have between liking order and things being the same, and also quite liking, sort of little curios that crop up because of the arbitrary way that things are done sometimes. And, it strikes me that we've got less and less arbitrary with Doctor Who, to the extent that now, you have the same incidental musician, the same director of photography throughout the whole season, whereas actually in the old days, was a different musician, different DOP, film cameraman, whatever, and then different directors, of course, as well. I know you have different directors now, but it's not quite the same job. They certainly don't have the sort of the same level of control as they did in classic Who, where they would get to call the shots literally and cast it and choose the incidental musician and have the overall sort of tone. Now that happens much more at executive level, and I don't know. And so obviously as TV consumers, we are expected to know as soon as I start watching it, I'm watching that show. That show has to have a strong sort of brand identity. Whereas I quite like the odd little quirk that means it is part of the same thing, but has a bit that's slightly different. So anyway, that explains why these omnibuses have different post-credits coders, because they're not really very important, and I dread to think what's been on some of them, because it's just what I kind of think about at the end. It's tiresome extemporism, extemporaneous, extemporizing. It's tiresome extemporizing, and so I hope you like it.